Welcome to the Brave Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Connie Jacob, and today I have a very special friend, Debbie Pearmain, who is the principal at One Stop HR. I absolutely adore Debbie because the work that she does in workplaces is outstanding. And the reason why she's so outstanding is because she's been doing this for 20 years. She has 20 years of experience in HR. She's worked as a consultant for leading organizations like TELUS Health, the Canadian Mental Health Association. She worked in management, culture development. She's a flourishing workplace and life coach. She is an incredible mother. I'm telling you, I don't know what this woman does not do. Debbie, I'm so excited to talk to you about healthy workplaces today.
I am so excited also. So thank you so much for having me. And it's really a joy for me to be here having this important conversation with you.
Well, and it's going to be a really good one because before I pressed record, we were having our pre-podcast preamble, and you said a statement that just almost took my breath away. You talked about to create a healthy work environment, you need to be brave.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
hit me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What do you mean when you say that statement?
I was thinking about the theme of our conversation today, and the need to be brave just kept coming up for me. And I was thinking about the work that I've been doing, I'm going to say really specifically over the last 5 years. I've had the privilege to speak to CEO groups through, Tech Canada and McKay CEO forums. And also, just as you mentioned, working with some leading leadership development consulting companies all around the world, speaking to groups of leaders around topics like workplace mental health, well-being, work-life integration, coaching for resiliency. And I've got to tell you, they have not been easy conversations. You know, there have been lots of times where, of course, I have met resistance with specific leaders, resistance with different companies. There's pushback, there's always competing priorities, competing agendas, and even still some discrimination, right? Still in our society around topics like mental health and, even disability management. So I just feel that there's a real call for HR folks in our society today to stand up and really be brave. And it takes courage and it takes confidence to speak against and speak for, right? Some of the real unhealthiness that exists in workplaces today. So I'm constantly having to, right, exercise my 5 seconds of courage in different rooms and different conversations with people. This is not easy.
What are some of the things that you're noticing that we need to be brave about, that maybe someone would be hesitant to speak out or speak up about?
Okay. Well, I mean, here's the thing that, one of the things that I do with my clients is employee engagement surveys. And what is the purpose of an engagement survey? So most of my clients, embark on surveys once a year, and it's a confidential, anonymous way to get feedback on all kinds of things going on in your workplace. And the surveys I do measure, 15 different components to workplaces. And we look into areas that impact psychological health and well being. And so, even just as a starting point, for an organization to agree, right, to take the time to say this is an important exercise for our business and be willing to then look at the results, right, and uncover the good, the bad, the ugly about what's happening in that workplace. That takes courage. And that's even just the beginning of the journey, right? Is let's do a health checkup and actually see and uncover, right? Not just what's going well, but what the pain points are. And in some cases, we're uncovering unhealthy, toxic behaviors, we're uncovering teams and leaders that are unhealthy. And then we've got to figure out strategies of how we're going to now deal with and address those things. Right? This is no easy task, Connie. This takes a lot of courage. And I will say that over my 20 years of doing engagement surveys for companies, there's lots of leaders who love the idea of this, but then when it actually comes to hit the go button, fear can get in the way. And lots of people make excuses like not the right time operationally, or some other competing priority has come up. But I kind of use the analogy of how not everyone, for example, loves to go to the doctor once a year to get a health checkup. Not everybody wants to know things that maybe aren't going well in their bodies or in their lives. And it does take courage to take that first step, right? Because there is this kind of uncertainty that comes along with it, and this real lack of control too, of what happens if we find out things that we didn't know or didn't want to know. And then people are going to hold us accountable to do something about what we find out, right? So
Mm.
that's just even one example of where courage and bravery is really needed, just even in the first step.
That is so true. And I feel like if workplaces, well, if they don't, there's a lot at stake. If they
There,
don't, like if we didn't go to the doctor and we found out we had some kind of cancer, like there's a lot at stake. What would
yes,
you, so that's from the top.
yes.
And then even from the ground level, say that employee, what do you see there with their need to be brave?
Yeah, that is such a good question, because I also think that just because, the business owner, the president, the CEO, the leadership team decides this is a good idea, doesn't mean that the employee group is trusting of it. And I've also seen that in a number of situations over the years, where then leaders are kind of disappointed with the lack of either participation from their company, or, you know, a group of employees skipping a number of questions. Because again, trust really has to be at the center of this relationship. And I think, the first year that companies launch engagement surveys, we definitely see lower participation rates, because employees are sort of like unsure and like dipping their toe in the water to see, is this really confidential? Will someone see, the open-ended comments that I make? Is this going to somehow come back on me in a negative way? And then we also, for example, can see themes that come up in organizations where, when I run reports, you might run an overall company report and there's quite good feedback and participation. But then when you drill down and you run reports by department, you start to really be able to pinpoint, for example, who an unhealthy leader might be, or, some challenges that exist in certain parts of the business. And so it's a real trusting exercise also for employees to believe that the feedback that they'll provide won't be used against them, and will actually be used in order to help make the company healthier and more positive and more productive in terms of culture.
Mm.
So, like, I hope you're hearing, right, that there's a need for both parties to really be brave, and for trust to be at sort of the cornerstone of whether or not these employee engagement surveys end up being of value or not.
Right. Yes. I remember reading in Stephen Covey's book, Speed of Trust, when
Mm,
there's low trust, things go very slow. And when there's high trust, things
mm,
can go quickly. There can be that innovation. And I don't know about you, but in my work in schools, I noticed that there's such low trust in the
mm,
leadership and in the staff that sometimes we're going at a snail's pace,
mm,
which then we have people leaving. I don't think it's any different than any any industry, to be honest. And
Mhm.
so we have people either leaving, or we have that disengagement, again, that behavior. Behavior
Mm,
is always communication. And so if people are opting out, if they're not participating, well, that's telling us a story. That's
absolutely.
telling us a narrative that we need
Yeah.
to listen to. And so what are some ways, like, because I think you're right. I think that trust is going to have to be the foundation, that building that safety and that trust. Um, how do we do that?
Mhm. I mean, again, such a great question. And, I love that we're even starting to have these conversations. When I think back 20 years ago, I used to teach with companies like Global Knowledge. And in the leadership courses I taught for them, we never really even talked about things like trust or humility or authenticity. And now these conversations are happening every day in the training that I deliver for leaders. And so, really, it gets down to ensuring you've got a leadership team that buys in to the belief that leadership today is about influence, not authority. And in order to be able to influence anybody, we need to have good relationships with those people. And in order to have good relationships, we just keep drilling down to this foundation of trust and respect. And the very first step, right? I mean, this has to come from whoever the business owner is. So let's just even start there. If the business owner doesn't believe that leadership today is about influence and that it's all about good relationships and it's all about trust and respect, then that's not going to drill down to the leadership team. And then we've got to make sure that the entire leadership team is bought into this. So everyone's on the same page, right? About what that looks like and what that doesn't look like. And, this is where, for example, even just doing an employee engagement survey, I can see very quickly which leaders don't operate that way based on the reports that I run by department and the feedback we receive. So, this information is really valuable because sometimes we have a leadership team, and I think of you've got one or two bad apples that might be spoiling it for the whole culture. And we're not even sure who those people are. Right. And so the only way we can start to uncover some of this is by doing surveys in a way that are confidential and anonymous and getting the real input from the employees who are working underneath those leaders on a day-to-day basis. I also, Connie, just want to make the connection here. There's so many other reasons why this is important beyond the let's build a healthy, engaging culture. We also know that the war on talent today is really fierce. And as you just were saying, your top performers aren't going to stick around.
Yeah, that's right.
Like people today, workplace, like, first of all, it's an employee's market, not an employer's. I mean, I used to do recruiting, I got out of it because it's so time consuming, hard, and challenging today to find good people, right? Like, we have a massive labor market shortage. And so, just think about this. The risk of not identifying this stuff and trying to correct it and fix it is this. Your high performers will jump ship. They have confidence. They're like, I don't need to put up with this.
Yeah.
This isn't working for me. Off I go. I'm going to find somewhere else.
Yes.
And we're seeing that more and more, right? I mean, all the articles last year, the great resignation, like COVID really did a number on a lot of us psychologically. And people are just, it's not worth it anymore to stay in a job, in a workplace that's unhealthy or dysfunctional. And so, again, right, lots of reasons why this is important.
So important. It's true. Powerful people make powerful choices. And so it's the powerful ones, you're right, they're the ones leaving. And the ones that are starting to awaken, they're starting to do that personal development for themselves. They're starting to understand, oh my goodness, I can manage me. You mean I don't have to be victim to my surroundings? I can create for myself what I desire. Those people are awakening, they're leaving. And then that's unfortunate because then who's left in the workplace is unpowerful people who are victims who then create more problems. And now we have an explosion, a volcano effect of toxicity. And I love what you're saying about relationships. We need to come back to being relational and understanding the relational value. People aren't numbers anymore. People won't put up with being numbers anymore. They need to feel like they are valuable, and how we make them feel matters now. And building that kind of connection that says, I care about you as a person and I care about you as an employee, as a person on our team. And so what would you say to anyone who's trying to build that kind of connection with their team? What would you say to them?
Well, it's again, great question. And I think of things like, how do you build good relationships with people outside of work? So I love, one of the strategies, I teach a workshop on creativity, as I know you do as well. And one of the strategies is pattern breaking. Right? So, literally in our minds, often we think it's so hard to build a good relationship with people at work because we're limited to what that might look like in the workplace based on our past history of what that looked like for us. So, let's just forget about work for a minute. And I'm going to ask you, how do you go about building relationships with people like friends, neighbors? What are some of your strategies?
Oh, wow, that's a fantastic question. I think just taking time, even remembering like, oh, I have a neighbor, or oh, I should call my friend. Like, so maybe not being so me focused, waking up in the morning and really trying to be intentional about how can I heard somebody say once, you're either a there you are type of person or a here I am type of person. But here I am type of person is like, it's about me, it's about my agenda, it's about what I want. But a there you are type of person is about who's on my team today? Who can I see? Who can I bless? Who can I empower today? Who can I look at in the eye and tell them that they matter? And
Mhm.
that's always really stood out to me. And that's so simple, really. It's just being mindful.
Yeah, it costs us nothing. And so again, I would think of, okay, who's on my team? I even say when I coach leaders, give yourself a starting point. So, who is on your team? Write down their names. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how connected do you feel to that person? So, how would, if you had to give a number to the relationship, would you say it's kind of 5, like just a pass? Is it a 7? Is it a 9? Like, get a sense of where you feel the relationship is at. That's the first step. And then from there, you identify, okay, who are the people that I don't have really a connection with? So, what are all the things I could do? So, I love what you said, which is just make a point of seeing them. So, whether that's FaceTime or it's on a Zoom instead of just on text message or email, powerful. We just talked about how you traveling to visit a client face to face and the impact that that had on just building connection and trust. So that's huge. And then you go from there. Okay, what are some other things I could do? Engage in conversation, get to know the person. Maybe you go for a coffee. Maybe you go for lunch. Maybe you take the team for a lunch. Maybe you do a potluck. Like there's just so many different ideas of things that we could do. But it starts with this is important and it matters. I even think of, this morning, me leaving my house and I'm turning the corner, I'm at the stop sign, and there's an elderly neighbor out walking her dog. And, I haven't seen her in weeks. And of course, I'm in a hurry to get somewhere. So I could have just turned, drove, and smiled and waved. But instead, I paused, unrolled the window, 2 minutes. Just, I see you. How are you? How are you doing? What are your plans for the holidays? And then shut the window and drive on. So even just slowing down to say, like, these people matter, and I'm going to take time and invest time. So that's kind of like the simple starting point, Connie. And not to like totally throw a curveball into the conversation, but it also made me think about another area where I do feel like leaders need to be really brave with this stuff is when you have people on your team that aren't respectful or aren't positive or aren't maybe healthy in the ways they relate to team members, to other people, that you don't tolerate that. Because that's another real issue that I'm seeing crop up in engagement survey results is things like bullying or discrimination or harassment, and disrespect, and just the damage that that can do to the trust in the environment, right? Because you got to remember, employees are looking to the leader as like, we're in your care.
Yeah.
Right? I think of like kids with their babysitter. It's like we're under your umbrella of care. And if you're allowing this to happen and you're not dealing with that individual or addressing it or taking steps to remove the person, like that really can impact the trust in the environment as well.
Yes, yes, and it probably takes the trust away faster than all the time it took to build up that trust. And so it might feel like a moment of, oh my goodness, I don't like confrontation. I don't want to be brave here. Maybe if I just ignore it, it will go away. But imagine how much time it's taken to build that trust and how something as letting things go and letting people just behave those in those ways, how quickly that trust gets taken, all that work just kind
Very
of flushed down the toilet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where again, like, I think of what are the skills we're equipping leaders with today? Difficult conversations is huge because it's not just about managing conflict. It's how do I coach people on my team that aren't coachable? How do I coach people on my team to see blind spots that they have that they're just not willing to admit or aware of? Right? How do I coach people on my team to better communicate and resolve conflict with each other?
Mm.
So these are all really important skills that we need to be teaching. Again, just with that idea of how do we help create a healthier work environment so that these things aren't just being ignored or pushed under the rug.
And that's why I love what you're doing. I love that you are giving these engagement surveys, but also really consulting with the workplace on how can we make it better. I love that you're a solutions-oriented person. I love that you don't just expose things, but you actually come alongside and you consult and you coach people and you see people so well and you connect so well. And so I want to encourage any workplace that's listening, whether you're an organization, whether you're a corporation, whether you're school leadership. This is so important, and I would actually highly recommend Debbie as a resource for you, just because she has so many years of experience. But after listening to her, you can hear her heart and you can hear what she's really about and always so practical and caring. So Debbie, I really appreciate what you're bringing out there to the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Connie. And, again, I just keep coming back to this. We can create healthier work environments, and it's literally one step at a time. And it starts with just being able to identify the things that maybe aren't working or aren't healthy. And then I love what you said, which is we don't just sort of expose these things and then leave you hanging. It's then I partner with companies, hold their hand, walk them through the journey. Sometimes it takes years, but it's one step at a time. And it's really helping create a path forward, right? Towards greater engagement, greater job satisfaction, greater retention, and overall just greater mental health and well-being, because we know that one of the biggest reasons that people are leaving workplaces is because the lack of things like work-life balance or the lack of support for mental health and well-being, and then the impacts that that's having outside of work on people's personal lives, right? So there is a need for companies and businesses to really partner in creating more of a holistic approach to health and well-being for employees.
Yeah, so true. Well, if you're an employer or a leader out there listening, Debbie and I both want to encourage you to be brave, to
Mhm.
create that workplace that you've dreamed of and that the people on your team have dreamed of, which will only have an enormous ripple effect into their families, into
Mhm.
their homes, and into communities. And so, Debbie, thanks again for being on the podcast, and everyone else, just keep being brave.